Modern life is a constant pressure environment, and even experienced leaders can find themselves in moments where they're unprepared. Not intellectually, not strategically, somatically. That distinction matters more than we might like to admit. Most of the people that I work with are intelligent, reflective, well-educated. They've read the books, they understand the systems, they can articulate their values, they can explain their patterns with impressive clarity. All right, before I go further though, quick orientation. If you haven't already, pause this video, go down to the description, take the Somatic Skins Quiz, because not every body and so not every leader will respond to pressure in the same way. So knowing how your nervous system organizes will change how you hear everything and apply what I'm about to say. So you can come right back. All right. When real pressure arrives, conflict, uncertainty, volatility globally, exposure, risk, something else takes over, not always our better selves. And this isn't because we don't know better. It's because knowing is not what runs the system under load. Under pressure, the body leads. Habit leads. Whatever has been rehearsed leads. And most adults have never rehearsed staying centered and coherent inside of real intensity and failure. They've improvised their way through it, sure. They've survived it. They've reflected on it afterward, but they haven't trained for it. We don't actually typically train for disruption. We're evaluated inside of it and we learn on the back end. And so that's the context we're usually operating in. Now, I want to say something that may sound counterintuitive at first. The problem most leaders are facing right now is not a lack of insight, attention, intention, or awareness. It isn't even a lack of consciousness training. It's a lack of developed capacity. And capacity is not a mindset. It's not a curriculum like an intellectual curriculum, and it's not an attitude or a belief. Capacity is what your nervous system can actually hold before it fragments. This is where I may part ways with a lot of modern somatic and transformational language. There's a prevailing idea that if we just feel more, if we slow down and sense more, if we tune in more deeply, then things, challenges, problems will resolve. That subtlety is something that you can access through intention, introspection, or emotional attunement, but those things can't happen alone outside of the body. And to believe that they can, that belief is comforting, but it's biologically naive. The body cannot accurately sense what it cannot stabilize. So if posture is collapsing, if breath is retained shallow or erratic, if our joints are disorganized, attention is scattered, our intuition is completely off base, because the nervous system cannot produce reliable sensory data. It can produce sensation, but not always accurately interpreted sensation. This is the central confusion of contemporary somatics. People attempt subtle awareness from systems that are still fighting gravity and gross motor development. They search for nuance inside of bodies that have not yet earned structural coherence. So that results not in embodiment, but just in more narrative. The mind interprets bodily noise and calls it insight. Without structure, sensation becomes loud, vague, or overwhelming, even contradictory. Emotional intensity gets mistaken for depth. Reactivity gets mistaken for intuition. And collapse gets reframed as surrender and acceptance. And people genuinely believe they're accessing deeper truth, when in reality, they're losing mechanical organization. This isn't a moral failing on you as an individual or the collective industry. It's simply a sequencing error and a gap that we are very passionate to bridge. Subtle awareness is not the beginning of training. It is the reward at the end. Classical systems of development, mind, body, arts, understood this. They didn't start with introspection. They started with load. For example, Shaolin monks didn't begin with internal energy work. They began with horse stance, held for long, punishing durations under gravity. Tendons, joints, posture, breath were trained long before subtle sensation was ever discussed. Classical traditions within yoga followed the same arc. Asana came before pranayama, architecture before meditation. Stillness was the culmination of structure, not an alternative to it. Internal martial systems, Tai Chi, for example, are often mistaken for soft arts, but their training begins with hardness, repetition, alignment, circles and spirals drilled until the body becomes a coherent unit capable of bearing force without leaking or fragmenting. These systems all obeyed the same logic. Awareness without architecture distorts. Sensitivity without strength confuses accuracy of perception. They didn't romanticize subtlety and felt sense. They earned it. This brings us to a physiological truth that is hard to argue with once you see it clearly. Felt sense is not mystical. It's mechanical. The nervous system interprets internal signals through the lens of structural coherence. When the body is organized, sensation becomes precise. When the body is disorganized, sensation becomes misleading. Gravity is the first teacher. Load is the second. Under load, collapse cannot hide. A knee that caves, a rib that drops, a breath that panics. These show up immediately. Pressure creates feedback loops that the nervous system cannot narrate around. Pressure also doesn't lie. And the structural collapses will also be mirrored in the social and relational dynamics baked into life and leadership. Under pressure, the system reorganizes or it doesn't. It's as simple as that. Breath deepens to stabilize the spine. Dormant muscles wake up to distribute force. Attention sharpens to maintain balance. These adaptations are not optional. They're neurological necessities. Over time, they become architecture, and only then does the subtle sensing, all the spidey senses you want, emerge reliably. This is why repetition under demand matters so very much. The nervous system does not produce refined sensation on command. It produces sensation based on patterns it already trusts. Before awareness can become accurate, the body must develop motor engrams, deeply embedded neuromuscular sequences carved through repetition. You cannot feel what you have never stabilized. You cannot perceive a joint that you have never organized. Trying to feel more without motor patterning is like trying to read without an alphabet. This is also why so much modern deep experience is actually unpatterned activation, sensation without a map, heat without direction, emotion without context, and it all gets really muddy, especially if you're going to take those sensations and then make decisions based on them. Structure is what differentiates. Now, all of this may sound like it belongs purely in physical training, but this is exactly where leadership decision making, and real life enter the picture. Because modern life is load, uncertain, ambiguous. There's conflict, there's exposure. There are risks without guarantees and safety nets. The problem is not that these forces exist. The problem is that we aren't trained always to meet them when they are first occurring for us. And that's when intensity overwhelms our system instead of truly educating it. This is why practice environments matter. A practice environment is not an escape from real life. It's a simulator. It's an artificially constructed pressure field that applies uncertainty, constraints, power, innovation, and exposure without the catastrophic consequences that life tends to hold. This is not theatrical rehearsal, and it's not just pretend. It's actually structured load. After all, we can only train 3 things in life: our bodies, our mind, and our skills. A well-crafted somatic simulation like what we've designed in the Prestige address all 3. Inside a simulator, pressure becomes intelligence. Friction now has context. The nervous system can stay online and with what's happening in real time long enough to learn something new besides ew and yes. And that's how capacity is built. Not by reducing risk, but by increasing coherence and range. So here's a crucial point that often gets misunderstood. When people talk about safety in transformational spaces, what they often mean is the removal of anything destabilizing. Fewer edges, more gentle, less friction, reduced pressure. But real safety does not come from decreasing risk. It comes from strengthening the connected system so that it can remain oriented inside of ever-increasing risk without fragmentation or damage. And that is a very different definition of safety. It has enormous implications for conscious leaders. To walk the path of a visionary leader is to remain alive with risk. There are no guarantees. Likely there is no roadmap to what you're creating. There are no safety nets. There are no clear outcomes. Anyone promising insulation from that reality is not teaching leadership. They're teaching avoidance. Leadership is not about removing uncertainty. It's about developing the capacity to stay coherent inside it. This is where my passion for self-defense also fits very cleanly into this framework and how I coach leaders. And it's why I don't see it as a separate conversation from the transformational space at all. Self-defense is one of the clearest examples we have of structured re-entry into load. For example, many people, especially women, have experienced moments where intensity, life crossed a line in their physical safety, where power, proximity, distance, or force arrived too fast, without consent, and without tools. But afterwards, avoidance then feels protective, and in the short term it is. But avoidance over the long term doesn't restore their full agency. Capacity does. Self-defense allows someone to re-enter the terrain of threat with structure, consent, better tools, and repetition. It allows the nervous system to experience a different ending. That does not diminish or erase what happened, but it allows them to outgrow the current neural experience of it. And this is why when I'm working with bodies, and specifically women on the mat, I might say something like, I hope this does trigger you a little. I say the same thing in the environment of the Prestige and anyone working with me as a coach. And I don't say that to overwhelm them or to diminish safety, But I say it because I hope it does trigger them a little bit, because at that moment, we're here together on the mat, in the coaching container, with options. Now they can figure out how to navigate that challenge with their breath, how their attention can orient, how their body can learn a different response. And that's not re-traumatization, that is reclaimed agency. This applies far beyond physical self-defense. Leadership moments and the work we do, they do the same thing. So do creative risks, so do conversations that matter. Because frankly, modern life will continue to present moments of risk, uncertainty, power dynamics, etc. And the question is not whether intensity will arise. The question is whether your system has been intentionally trained to stay intact when it does. This is the through line across everything we teach. Awareness is not the beginning of transformation. It is the proof that transformation has already occurred. Body, mind, and spirit. The body must be built before it can be read accurately. Subtlety emerges from structure. Clarity emerges from coherence. Agency emerges from capacity, and capacity is trained by exposure, deliberately, progressively, under load with support. And that is what most leaders are missing. And that is what the modern life is quietly demanding of us. We don't need more insights. We need more structure. We don't need more safety from reality. We need more capacity with it. And that is the work. If this sparked an interest and you might be resonant with what we do, check us out below. I'll place the link in the description. Consider joining us for a season in the prestige and experience the positive impact and benefits firsthand. Reach out directly. If you made it this long in the video, thank you. I always appreciate getting to hang out with you a little bit. If you received some value, please do like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot.